can I confide in you briefly? This story is objectively huge. It is in many ways unprecedented. Not in quite the same way as previous parliamentary scandals, about which you will have varying degrees of knowledge. But in terms of what appears to have happened and the absence of anything similar having ever happened before. Leaked documents and market-sensitive information might seem like white-collar crimes, but of course in different contexts you're talking about forms of espionage, and you're talking about somebody who was the de facto deputy prime minister. And for the absolute avoidance of doubt, I think that this is huge and enormously damaging. Enormously, almost inexpressibly damaging. But you know what I do for a living. I don't think you need to be Sherlock Holmes to work it out, even if you're relatively new to this programme. You know what I do for a living. And I am perhaps inappropriately fascinated by the way in which the story is reaching you. And the way in which, and I keep a very close eye on switchboards here at LBC Towers, even when I'm not on air, it is not exploding in the way that I expected. I thought yesterday, for example, we'd do 2 hours straight on it, without any hesitation, deviation or repetition. And it's not exploding in the way that one might expect. Listen, I don't need to bore you with the details, but I have in front of me a screen, and you can see everybody else's screen when you're in the production office. And quality is not quantity, quantity is not quality. You know that. I can fill up the phones in 30 seconds flat by asking questions about litter or potholes or immigrants, and not a single or parking tickets, and not a single caller would have a single interesting thing to say. But there is a sort of relationship, obviously, between scale of response and scale of interest and scale of being interesting. And is it an inappropriate fascination? I'm just confiding in you. No one else is listening, don't worry. That and so's Eleanor, the producer. We're both curiously obsessed, along with some other colleagues, about why something so objectively enormous is not exploding all over our screens in the way that we would expect from other stories, from comparable stories. Look, the PPE scandal, goodness knows how many Boris Johnson scandals you're talking about. I wonder whether we got angrier there about the people who were refusing to admit the scale of the problem than we did. It was almost like everyone agrees that this is egregious and disgusting, and no one is defending it. But whereas with Priti Patel and Boris Johnson and Michelle Mone and whatever other scandal you want to pull from the previous 14 years, you'd always have a client journalist or a cabinet minister popping up to defend it. Is it because nobody is defending this? Are we numb now to bad behaviour? I don't know. And I can't open the programme with the question of why you aren't more interested in the thing that we're talking about, because I think you are interested. I've spent increasingly in recent years a degree of time being fascinated by or these weird relationships, the alchemy of what I was going to say what I do for a living, but actually it's the alchemy of what we do together every day. Isn't it? There's an alchemy here about sometimes we make magic and sometimes we don't. And nobody really knows why or what the constituent parts are for making magic. Partly, I suppose, you're not going to get a call from someone supremely across the facts or possessed of more understanding and intelligence than the rest of us have. But you might get a story like Margaret. You might get a call like Margaret in Catterick yesterday, who has an experience so profound and so pertinent to what we're talking about that it reaches parts other things can't reach. Nobody's shocked that someone so obviously weird as Peter Mandelson has turned out to be so obviously dodgy, except that he was back in power 2, 3, 4 times after previous scandals. So I may move on to that, and feel free to encourage or discourage me from looking at that question. It's a very odd thing for a phone-in host to do. Why are the switchboards not exploding on a story that is absolutely explosive? Because everyone agrees, maybe? Is it not interesting to... Anyway, I can't do that as the first hour. I may not even do it as the second hour. And then we've got PMQs at 12, which you'd think would be riveting, right? You've got Kemi Badenoch, even with her questionable competence, now handed... it's a bazooka that she's been handed. It's a Bren gun, if that's the correct phraseology that I remember from my Victor and Commando comics. She, you know, even she can't miss Keir Starmer today, can she? She should theoretically be able to blow him away. And it is to Keir Starmer that I want to turn your attention next, because I want to know what it's done to him. And I suffer from footballification, not quite as much as the next man or the last man, but I suffer from footballification. I find the idea of the political grouping that brought us austerity, Brexit, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, I find the idea of that alliance of media and political figures getting back into power quite chilling. This is not a particular enthusiasm for the people that are in power now, because it is almost a anybody but them kind of position. But the idea that this country has become so boiled and so bent that we would even contemplate putting into Downing Street somebody who was comfortable with Brexit, well, massive supporter of Brexit, massive supporter of Boris Johnson, massive admirer of Liz Truss. Those three things, of course, applied to Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage in almost equal measure. And the idea that we'd go back to that, we go and smash our faces against another brick wall of idiocy in the hope that the outcome would somehow be different, that energizes me. That animates my politics. And it's very hard to know sometimes where absolute contempt for them morphs into enthusiasm for the other. So Keir Starmer, it was a loveless landslide, is what people talked about. You don't have many people contemplating getting a Keir Starmer tattoo on their left pectoral anytime soon. He does not excite excitement. And for a long time, I really loved that. I really loved that. Good God, I thought, give me dullness. Not sunshine. Bring me dullness. Bring me rain clouds. Bring me boring. And he hasn't. This is the thing that I am edging ever closer to finding unforgivable. He hasn't brought us dullness. He hasn't brought us rain clouds. He hasn't brought us boring. He's brought us scandal. He's brought us U-turn. He's brought us very questionable competence. Not on a level that stands comparison with the epic errors of the last 14 years. It's more death by 1,000 cuts, or death by 1,000 U-turns, or death by 1,000 reversals. But this speaks to something different. This speaks to something that looks a lot like we have seen over the last 14 years. It seems to speak to the gulf between power and people. The sense that if I want something, I will ignore advice. If I want something... I mean, no one's talking about forming a circle around the Pritzker this morning. Nobody in the Labour. Gordon Brown has written to the authorities to complain about Peter Mandelson, and many of us grew up with... they were the holy trinity of New Labour, emerging from the ashes of Thatcherism to rule the country for 3 electoral cycles. Brown, Blair, Mandelson. It's no exaggeration to say that they were the holy trinity, or the unholy trinity, if you prefer. And one of them is now... I mean, they turned on each other a long time ago, and you can see Mandelson sharing incredibly inappropriate comments with Epstein about Brown. And now even Brown. So you're not going to have footballification in that sense. You're not going to have left-wing newspapers offering Peter Mandelson £500,000 a year to write a column after he's been utterly disgraced in the eyes of the entire nation, as Paul Dacre and the Daily Mail did with Boris Johnson. You're not going to have ludicrous sycophants and forelock tuggers pretending that what Peter Mandelson has done isn't a very big deal, or it's just a slice of cake, or he's just had a glass of prosecco. You're not going to get that epic corruption, that moral corruption that you get when it's a right-wing politician who's in a hole, or who's in a mess, who's in a scandal. But what are you going to get? What are you going to get? And that's why I want you to tell me how this affects your view of Keir Starmer. Because I got a really weird, I've turned into Jonathan Ross. I've got a really weird feeling that it's not really changing much for anybody except those of us who were still clinging to the idea that Keir Starmer was going to score a late equaliser or somehow pull a winner out of the bag in extra time. The visceral hatred people have for Keir Starmer, born largely of far-right online troll farms, but it's real, it's what people feel, and feel is real. They're not going to change their view. People in the Parliamentary Labour Party, and I'm speaking to a few at the moment, which I don't often do, it's a sign of how unprecedented this territory is, are profoundly unhappy. And the previous practice of blaming it all on Morgan McSweeney is going into abeyance now. There comes a point where it doesn't matter how ridiculous the monkey is, you're going to have to blame the organ grinder, right? And this story is unbelievably awful. Confidential details of internal discussions to a man minded to make money from everything he could lay his filthy fingers on, and crucially, who had already been jailed for soliciting a child for prostitution. Every show I've done since this latest tranche of documents was released has begun and in many ways ended there. The fact that they contacted him, they stayed in touch after he got done on a ludicrous plea deal. It's on Wikipedia. You don't need to be studying for a PhD in this to get your head around how ugly and how hideous it was. He was allowed to go home. They put a television in an office near his cell. The door of his cell was left open. He's in jail for child sex offences, effectively. There's some difference between US and UK law, but you can't libel the dead. He's in jail for child sex offences, or specifically for procuring a minor for prostitution. And they leave the cell door open. They can go home after a few months in the evenings. Leave the cell door open so he can stroll into the lawyer's office up the corridor and actually just watch television. So that's not the scandal that we're discussing today. The scandal we're discussing today is that Peter Mandelson stayed friends with him after that. Elon Musk still wanted to go to his parties, or maybe it was the conviction that made his parties look more attractive to certain type of men. We may never know. But every time I start talking about that angle or this angle, up to and including possible treason or espionage or whatever it is that we're talking about today, we still don't know for sure. Every time I start talking about it, I get stuck at the original conviction and the way that it didn't seem in any way to compromise his status. It didn't seem in any way to cause people to question who he was. Thank God, and here's some words I've never said before. Thank God for Tina Brown. Thank God for Tina Brown. Do you know what Tina Brown has done? Have you seen this? Because it's almost impossible to properly get across everything that's going on because there is so much of it and half of it is still yet to be released. But Tina Brown, a British journalist, I always forget slightly what her great achievements were. Did she edit the New Yorker? She was, anyway, one of the greatest journalists of her generation. And she received an invitation many, many years ago. This is the point where you think, am I going mad or should this never have been allowed to happen? She received an invitation many years ago in 2010, right? 2010. When Mandelson was still sucking up to Epstein. Not long after Epstein had got out of jail and Mandelson was sending him sensitive information. Tina Brown received an invitation to an Epstein dinner with Woody Allen and Prince Andrew, as he then was, in New York. Vanity Fair, the New Yorker Tatler, when she still worked out here. And do you know what she said? Oh, man, I love this woman. Do you know, sometimes it's like a lodestar appears in the sky and you think, we're not on our own. It is possible, it was possible in 2010 to say, absolutely, chuffing not, pal. I can't believe you're allowed out. I can't believe you're allowed near schools. They invited her to dinner with Andrew Windsor and Woody Allen, and she replied, what the is this? Oh, man, can I swear just once? Can I say the F word just once on the radio? How much trouble would we get into if I said the F word on? Because it's a moment. It's power. Words are power. She said it. She said, what the F is this? Eleanor won't let me swear, which is ridiculous, really, because they use all sorts of filthy words on other radio stations. But hey-ho. What the F is this? The paedophile's ball. This is as reported by the Financial Times, word for word, having been invited in 2010 to an Epstein dinner with Woody Allen and then Prince Andrew in New York. The magazine editor Tina Brown replied, "What the F is this? The paedophile's ball." That is, sweet summer child that I am, what I thought everyone would do. What I thought everyone would do. The host being, of course, the paedophile before any aspersions or knowledge was made public about everybody else on the guest list. Why would I go to a paedophile's party? Look, here's Tina Brown, right, and here's Elon Musk. Elon Musk is sending in messages saying, "Oh, can I come to your party, please? Tell me about the girls," or words to that effect. And Tina Brown is sending him a message with exactly the same knowledge and information about exactly the same man, saying, what the bleep is this? The paedophile's ball. Of course I'm not going. And Peter Mandelson went. Not necessarily to that party, but he went. Repeatedly. And then he lied about the maintenance of contacts, just hoping it would never come out. And then he continued to lie. He was telling the Times last week that he felt as if he was a man more sinned against than sinning. And Keir Starmer sent him to Washington, D.C. as ambassador, His Majesty's ambassador to the United Kingdom. And that's why today's first phone-in will be about how are you feeling about Keir Starmer this morning? Because I don't think... can you keep it up now? Can you keep it up now? However absolutely evidence-based your horror at the thought of letting the ghouls and the monsters have another go, letting the godfathers and godmothers of Brexit, Boris Johnson, austerity, Liz Truss, letting them have another go, which is the only effective alternative on the table at the moment, although I fully appreciate the relevance of the Greens, the Liberal Democrats, the SNP and Plaid Cymru and other parts of the United Kingdom from the one that I live in. Essentially, when it comes to who's going to inhabit Downing Street next, you've only got three choices. And the idea that we give another go to the godfathers and godmothers of Brexit, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, austerity and all the rest of it is obscene to anybody with a functioning brain. But how much longer? Can you cling on to Keir Starmer now? Can you really hold on to the hope? This is unforgivably stupid. Even knowing what we already know, it's unforgivably stupid what he's done. And it might be much worse than that. A Director of Public Prosecutions whose reputation was in many ways built on protecting women and girls. Not that you'd know it from online contributions, but it was his raison d'etre. It was his biggest, proudest achievement as DPP. And he put a man who was a pal of a paedophile in the Washington embassy. How big a problem is this scandal for Keir Starmer? Because I'm suffering from footballification. I don't want to let go of hope. But crikey, is this the biggest yet? Is this the biggest... I want to swear, I'm inspired by Tina Brown. Is this the biggest muck-up yet for Keir Starmer?